What's up, guys? Welcome to Wizarding Wiz, your source for everything going on in the wizarding world. So today, before I get started, if it is your first time to the channel, welcome, and please consider hitting that subscribe button and hitting that notification bell to make sure that you stay up to date with everything that we put out on the channel. If you're watching this, chances are you already know all about the game of Quidditch. In fact, some of you probably wish that we could play it in real life, and there have in fact been ways invented to play Quidditch in real life, minus, of course, the aspect of flying on broomsticks, because unfortunately, we just don't possess that technology yet. But did you know that long before Quidditch, there were actually about 5 other games played on broomsticks, invented by wizards all over Europe? Well, today's video is going to be a quick list of those games. Now, some of them are incredibly dangerous, others not so much, and a few of them are even still played today, alongside with Quidditch, although maybe not quite as popular. So, without further ado, let's roll right into it. Number 1. The annual broom race of Sweden. Now, believe it or not, this race has actually been around since the 10th century and is still practiced today, with pretty much no changes. You see, this is a 300-mile long race that stems from Kopparberg or Kopparberg, depending on how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. I'm not Swedish. I apologize if I'm ruining it. To Arjeplog, also not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and a huge part of this race flies straight through a dragon preservation. Spectators of this race nowadays will start in Kopparberg to cheer on all of the starters and then apparate to Arjeplog in order to congratulate the survivors of the race. And the winner of said race gets a trophy in the shape of a Swedish short snout. Now, while this may not be the most dangerous game on the list, flying through a dragon preservation can still be pretty nerve-wracking and pretty dangerous. If you're in the mood for something a little more risky, you can always go with the second game on this list, Stitchstock. Now, this game is of Germanic invention and is actually immortalized in a painting from 1105, which is captioned in German, which I will not try to pronounce because I can't pronounce it and I will slaughter it, but translated, it says that Gunther the Violent is the winner. Stitchstock is a simple game to understand. It consists of one 20-foot high pole topped with an inflated dragon's bladder. Maybe dragons that people survived from the Swedish race, who knows. One player on a broomstick will be tied around the middle of their body with a rope, which will then be attached to the 20-foot pole. Now, this player's job was to protect the inflated dragon bladder. Sounds simple and harmless enough, right? Well, maybe, until you realize that all of the other players whose job it was to try and puncture the bladder were flying around on broomsticks whose tips had been sharpened to a severe point in order to be able to puncture the dragon bladder. Now, the only plus side here was that the bladder guardian was allowed to use their wand along with any spells in order to stop or block the other players from puncturing said bladder. However, the game would only end under one of 3 conditions. Either 1, the bladder was successfully punctured. 2, the bladder guardian successfully defeated everybody trying to puncture the bladder. Or 3, the bladder guardian finally collapsed from exhaustion. Now, thankfully, for dragons and their bladders and bladder guardians everywhere, this game died out about the 14th century and really is no longer played. Now, the third game on this list comes to us from the Emerald Isle itself, the home of the leprechauns, Ireland. Now, I am probably going to slaughter the name of this game as well because I don't speak Gaelic and I only know a little bit of it. And this is not one of the words I know. The game's name is Ingingian. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I may be pronouncing it wrong. I will put it on screen here. If any of you happen to speak Gaelic, or at least know how to pronounce Gaelic words, let me know in the comments section if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Now, this game, again, was pretty easy to understand and pretty simple to play, even though it was still a little bit dangerous. See, this game was played by flying on a broomstick through barrels that had been poised very high in the air on stilts. But that's not all. During this, you are going to have to be carrying a ball, which again was made of an inflated bladder, this time of a goat. Seems to be a theme here with the bladders. Now, see, it wasn't just a series of barrels. The thing is, these barrels were on fire, and you had to successfully weave your way and dodge your way through these barrels without catching on fire with the ball, also called a dawn. And when you came to the end of the run, you had to throw the dawn through the last hoop, which also was on fire. Basically, the player who accomplished this the fastest and didn't catch on fire or lose the dawn was the winner. Now, while the previous two games definitely seem pretty dangerous, and flying through a dragon reservation is certainly no summer picnic, the fourth game on our list is actually considered to be one of the most dangerous ever played, and with good reason. And when you hear about it, you may just leave this video with a headache of your own. Coming to you from the wonderful hills of Scotland, Crayfish, which I'm probably not pronouncing properly. Again, I don't speak Gaelic. I will leave it on the screen. It is in fact so dangerous, it has its own feature in a Gaelic poem of tragedy. And the very first verse of it is enough to make you ask the question, why? And it goes as follows. The players assembled, 12 fine hearty men. They strapped their cauldrons on their heads and poised ready to fly. At the sound of the horn they were swiftly airborne, yet 10 of their number were fated to die. If you happen to think that that first verse alone is a bit macabre, even without context, wait till you hear how this game is played. Now, as stated in the poem, it was played by 12 men on broomsticks, and what they would do is strap cauldrons to the tops of their heads. The reason they're fated to die is because when the horn sounds, or sometimes it was a drum also, hundreds of rocks and boulders, all varying in different sizes, that had been hovering in the sky via hover charm, are then released and crash to the earth with the full force of gravity. And the object of this game is to catch as many rocks in your cauldron on top of your head as you can without dying. It may sound brutal, but many Scottish wizards actually considered this game and being able to play this game to be the height of manliness and the ultimate test of courage. Unsurprisingly, this game, like many others, gained popularity in the Middle Ages. Shockingly enough, this game wasn't made illegal until 1762, even despite the amount of death caused by playing. Now, so far we have covered games from Sweden, Germany, Ireland, and Scotland, but what about good old England? Well, they are not to be forgotten, and true to England in the Middle Ages, the wizarding game that they played is pretty brutal. Known as Shunt Bumps, this game is pretty much jousting on broomsticks. Gaining its popularity in Devon, England, Shunt Bumps is basically known as little more than a crude form of jousting by most of the wizarding world, and the point of the game was pretty much the same. All you must do is knock any of your opponents off of their broomsticks, with the last player standing, or flying in this case, being the winner. Now don't despair, guys, I still have one more for you, and I know it seems like violence and blood and gore and all types of crazy mess is really the main theme of these magical sports. That's not true for all of them. And sure, while the threat of death may make a game more competitive in a sense, it's not all that is necessary for a good game. In fact, the good people of Herefordshire knew this, and that is why they invented Swyvenhodge. Now this game, Swyvenhodge, actually takes a good bit of skill and some strategy to be able to play and play well. Players of Swyvenhodge would sit on their brooms backwards so that the bristles were coming forward from between their legs, and they would use this brush part, this bristle part of the broom, almost like a bat, to bat around a ball, this time made of an inflated pig's bladder. I told you bladders were kind of a staple in these games, and they would bounce this back and forth over the hedge, similar to modern day badminton or volleyball, and the rules were pretty simple as well. The first person to miss gave a point to their opponent, and this went back and forth until one of the teams, or one of the players, depending on if you were playing teams or 1v1, earned 50 points, at which point the game was over. Nobody hurt, nobody dead, nobody bleeding, except for the pig whose bladder you had to take and inflate to make the ball. This game, unlike many of the others, is actually still played today, although never quite as popular as Quidditch, but still a fan favorite. So what did you think about these magical games played on broomsticks before Quidditch? Did you know about any of them? Did you know that there were even any other broomstick played games other than Quidditch? in the wizarding world. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed the video, consider throwing a thumbs up on there. And if it was your first time ever watching me, please consider subscribing. Thanks for joining me, guys. Until the next one, stay safe and watch out for those Dementors.